Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is Rashbi, Rabbi Shmuel Ben Yehoshua, Rabbi Stephen Epstein with you with this week's Torah portion. As you see, I get around a little bit. This week, we're doing it in my office. So been in a condo, different home, different places, kind of been getting around over the summer. So hope you're doing well. Hope you're keeping cool for the summer. We've had some wild weather, so do what you have to do to remain healthy. So a little bit of a shout out to the congregation. For those of you that have seen it, either on Zoom or been part of our congregation, we started using a different Torah for our Torah services on Shabbat. Now, a bunch of years ago, one of our, I don't know if it's a former or current member, but they donated a few Torahs, and that's the Hebrew plural, the Hebrew feminine plural, Torah, one Torah, multiple Torah, to the synagogue. One of them was a longer than usual Torah. And that I understand from our Sofer, which is who is a rabbi that actually writes Torah, and also checks the writing to make sure that the writing hasn't faded, making sure the letters are intact. I had one check my tefillin. We've discussed in a previous 10-minute Torah. So he told me, he mentioned that the long Torah is a Czechoslovakian Torah, which is pretty interesting. And when people think of a Torah, they think of really an Ashkenazic Torah. Ashkenazic is European from the Yiddish word for German, Ashkenazi. And these are the Torahs that you think of. They've got the two poles, which are called eitzim or trees, dowels actually. And the parchment is wrapped around each end and it's rolled throughout the course of the year until we finish reading on Simchat Torah. We roll it back from Deuteronomy, the last chapter, the last book, to Genesis 1, the first part of the first book of the Torah, and then we start reading over again. We also have a Sfardic Torah, which happens to be the best Torah that we have in terms of the writing is very clear, it's very easy to read, and it was commissioned, I believe, back in the early 90s, 1993. And when I say commissioned, I wasn't part of the synagogue at the time, had a rabbi come and spend the year writing out the Torah. And they put it in this big case. You open it up and there's the Torah. Now, it's a little different because the poles are within that case. It's a little tough to roll. And I don't even know if to call it a case or a box, really. It's kind of this round casing, and you open it up and there's your Torah. It's kind of heavy. Not all of them are that heavy, but this was, they put some work into this, some money into this. They made it very special. And I thought it might be good to use it since it is so clear. And since it was commissioned, and since some of our congregants actually participated, and this is typical in some larger synagogues, people actually donate to the Torah and they get to write a letter. And by writing a letter, actually coloring it in and filling it out, you've basically fulfilled the commandment of writing a Torah. So that being special, it's important that we use it. Why we've kind of shied away is because it's heavy, it's bulky, it can be tough to carry. But we're going to start using it. We're going to learn. We're going to get more adept at managing it. Just kind of think it's important in honor of the people that donated it, and because the congregants participated in writing it. We've been using it just for a specific reading, which we're actually going to discuss today. But I think we're going to start using it. I'm going to get a little bit better at managing it, and we'll use it. Okay, so it turns out that we were using it for a specific maftir, which actually is incorporated into this week's Torah portion, Pinchas. At the end of the portion, not the end, but toward the latter part of the parsha, there is a section on the offerings. And this is back when there was a temple. Instead of having a Mussaf, which is an additional service that we do now, they had an additional offering. Now, the Amidah, which means standing, or the Tefillah, the prayer, that silent standing prayer that we repeat, has taken the place of the offerings that we do since there isn't a temple. And because God said, you're going to have your offerings, your altar in one place and in only one place. Because the danger is that if we have it in multiple places, you might have differences in the way they do things. Next thing you know, you've got different cults. And, Judaism just goes in multiple directions that it was never meant to be. And it corrupts really the ethic and moral principles in the relationship with God and the covenant, etc. So there is a section in Pinchas, chapter 28, where they talk about the additional offering for Shabbat, the additional offering for the new moon. Then it talks about the offerings for Passover and Sukkot and Shavuot and Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. And during those specific festivals and holidays, the Maftir reading, which is the reading after the main 7 readings, the 7 aliyot, as they're called. Aliyah means to come up, because you're coming up on the bima, and the bima is a raised platform. 3 steps for the 3 stages that Moses ascended Mount Sinai. And it is that specific reading, that additional reading, that is the reading of what the offering was. And that in modern times takes the actual place of doing the actual offering. Interestingly enough, if you have a traditional prayer book, and when I say traditional, the Orthodox prayer books, at the beginning of the morning service, morning, I mean any morning service, whether it's Shabbat, whether it's the weekday, whether it's a festival, we have blessings of the Torah, we have gratitude for the gift of the soul, gratitude for the gift of the body, we have the morning blessings. Thank you for God for giving us the ability to distinguish between day and night, to be able to be a Jew, to stand erect, things like that. There's also, at the end of that part of the service, there are the offerings, the everlasting light, the Ner Tamid, the old everlasting candle, the incense, things like that. And that's actually part of it. So by reading those offerings, it's as if we're doing the offerings. And that's what the modern people say. So that's part of the service. Okay, so I spent a lot of time on that. Let's go back and talk about another very critical, very key part of not only this portion, but of the whole Torah. And that is women's rights. So this guy Tzalosaphat had died of his own sins. That's the way the Torah says it. And the problem is that he left no sons. He left 5 daughters. The 5 daughters come to Moses and say, look, and this is after they've been in the wilderness 39, 40 years, and they're getting ready to conquer and settle the land with the new generation. And these women come up to Moses and Aaron and say, look, our father died without leaving sons. Now, back in the ancient world, the sons were the ones that inherited. And of course, the firstborn son got a double portion. So if you have, for example, 3 sons, the assets when the man died were divided 4 ways. And the firstborn son got a double share, and the other 2 got the other 2 shares. The other 2 shares, yeah. So there were nobody ever really considered about daughters. If you had daughters, you kept trying to get a son, or else you married your daughters to a wealthy man. The idea was to marry a daughter to someone that would really, support them. But these daughters, these women, Noah, Malka, I forget the other 3, they went to Moses and Aaron and said, look, our father died without having any sons. What happens to his assets? We don't think it's right that his assets should just go to somewhere else. We're his heirs. And Moses said, well, let me confer with Hashem and I'll get back to you. And God says, and this is almost an exact quote, the daughters of Tzalosaphat speak right. They speak correctly. And they are correct, and they should have a share. They should get the inheritance the same way a son would. And now we've got a new lineage that includes daughters. So if there's no sons, there's daughters. If there's no daughters, no anybody, then the man's brother, et cetera, and you can kind of read it for yourself. So what makes this interesting, this parsha interesting in my mind, is that the parsha is called Pinchas because in last week's portion, you had a prince of the tribe of Shimon and a Moabite princess who seduced him. They're cavorting in front of the whole, people in the congregation. And Pinchas is so aghast of this, he runs them both through with a spear. And of course, people are now, wanting revenge. And God says, no, he did the right thing. And Pinchas did this because he treasured the covenant so much. He stood up for God. Now, consider the similarity that these women approached Moses and Aaron in a very humble, a very positive, a very sincere way. And Pinchas stood up for God. So now we have the element of devotion in our Torah portions, in stark contrast to all the complaining that had gone on in Numbers. The people wanting meat, the spies bringing back a negative report, the rebellion of Korah, and Dathan and Abiram. And now we have these people that are righteous, that really believe in God and are doing it the right way. So let's take that into consideration. Let's remember the mitzvot. Let's remember to do them and be sincere in our devotion to Hashem and be righteous in our relationship with our fellow people. Shabbat Shalom.